Once again, my name is Keith Bateman. I head up demand gen here at Sales Intel, one of the sponsors for the ABM-A-THON. And we're going to be understanding how to identify your buyers and build your perfect target account list here today. So like I said, I head up demand gen here at Sales Intel. And I'm excited to be here today and be a part of this great event and to speak to you. So our agenda for today is going to be in three parts. We're going to be talking about how to build a framework for developing and refreshing your ideal client profiles and buyer personas, which is, obviously an important step into really building the perfect target account list and for any marketing sales campaign. The tips for developing an effective buyer journey framework, as well as a content map, because I've realized over the course of my career, if you don't have content or you don't know where it is or you don't know how it lines up with your campaigns, it's really not effective, and you can't be effective in what you do. And then the tactics for really leveraging data to maximize your audience reach, which is something obviously coming from the company I come from, I've really learned the power of data in the many different ways that you can utilize it, especially when you know the first two parts. When you know your personas, you know what your content is and what it looks like, and then having the right data to really reach the right prospects at the right time. And then we'll take your questions. So if you have any questions throughout the presentation today, please chat them in or put them in the Q&A tab. And we have some great moderators in the chat who will help organize those. And we'll try to make some time to get to them at the end if we have any time. And if we don't, I'll make sure to reach out to you personally after today's call, and we can get those answered. So feel free to put any comments or thoughts in the chat log. So this is the journey we're going to go on today. So, ABM-A-THON is all about the sprint. It's a long journey, so you take a piecemeal at a time, but this is our journey towards better targeting. So we're going to be talking about many different things today, taking many different stops. The first one is going to be about defining our ICP and our buyer personas. That's going to be the first stop. Then once we've done that, we're going to develop and review our journey framework. Then we'll take a slight pit stop in auditing and mapping our content to our buyer journey framework to make sure that we have all the pieces in place to really target our buyers at the right stages within their cycle with us. And then we'll do a review and audit of our actual database of our prospects to make sure, does the quality of our database match up with who we're trying to target? Do we have complete profiles? Do we have all the data we need to really run effective campaigns? And if we don't, where can we find the right data? And then finally, developing those quality target account lists to run effective ABM campaigns. So we'll make all these stops, and by the end, hopefully you've come out with a little bit more knowledge than when you started. So part one, frameworks for developing and refreshing your ICP and buyer personas. So we start here with a couple of questions. So when you're getting to know your audience, and this is a different exercise for many different companies and many different people. So I've worked in many different startups in my career, and a lot of times we think we know our audience, but when I dig in deeper and we're asking this question to the marketing directors and the sales directors, we think we know our customers based on who just recently closed an opportunity with us, but we don't know who our actual addressable market is, or who we should really be targeting. We just know who we closed recently. That doesn't necessarily mean that's our actual audience per se. So I like to define what our TAM, SAM, and SOM is. So obviously our TAM is our total addressable market, and that refers to our overall demand for our products and services that we provide. So it's really, what is our overall revenue opportunity available to our product if we actually reach the 100% market share? So if we control the entire market, what's the total overall prospects that we would be in demand for? And that could be a big number if you have a wide-reaching product like Sales Intel, which is providing data to B2B companies. So that could be a huge number. Or if you have a very niche product, it could be a small number. But it's good to know that number just to know what are the available prospects that you could reach out to at any given time. But when you drill into that a little bit more, when you look at your serviceable addressable market, your SAM, it's important to know who you could target today with your products and services that's within your geographical reach. So knowing the restrictions of who you can reach geographically allows you to filter down that number to know what is that serviceable, filter on your total TAM. Because we know you can't reach your entire TAM within the parameters of your business. So you need to filter that down to your geographical reach, and it allows you to know what is that, what is that 100 million? What is that 10 million prospects that you potentially could reach within your geographical reach? So if you're a US-based company and only have US-based customers, or you only work within North America, what are those restrictions on your business today that you can actually go out and reach within your audience scope? And then lastly, what is your today serviceable attainable market? And this is the portion of the SAM that you can realistically capture today based on your budgets, based on your sales team, based on your marketing scope, based on the tools that you have and platforms you have in place today. So this is realistically who you can actually capture and market to today. So knowing your SOM is important because that is really who we want to try and who we're actually going to try to capture today with our marketing programs. So knowing those numbers are important because it allows you to know where you are at today and where you can potentially grow in the future if you have the right tools, if you have the right data, if you have the right platforms in place to grow your marketing programs in the future. So once you have those numbers aligned, that's great. The next thing is, have we defined our ideal client profile frameworks? And this may mean different things to different people. Some companies I've worked with, their ICP is composed of what industries they go after, their location. So industries, location, and employee size. It's 3 things. Now, for you, that may be okay. That's three identifiable factors of who we target. But ideally, if we're running effective ABM campaigns, we really want to go even deeper in defining our ICP frameworks. Or we want to refine what we already have and make sure we're refreshing those campaigns on a quarterly or even, at least every 6 months. We want to be reviewing what our ICP framework is made up of. And what that involves is both firmographic data and technographic data. So what are the number of employees that we're looking to target? What are the geographic locations that we can service? What are the industries that we want to target? What is the technology of our ideal customers? What do they integrate with? So if you're a company that you have great partnerships with CRM platforms, or you have great partnerships with, could be sales engagement platforms or dialers, knowing which of those platforms that your ideal customers work alongside can help you create a criteria like you see on the right that allows you to know, okay, if they're 50 to 500 employees and they're located in the US and within these 3 industries, software design, software, development, and, construction or something, if they're in those 3 and they have all these integrations with HubSpot and some industry specific CRM, then we know that's an ideal customer client and that's who we want to target. But we want to take it even a step further than that. Not only just having firmographic tiering and technographic tiering of all those characteristics, we also want to put scoring next to them. So for that instance, if we're targeting clients that are 50 to 500, we want to weight that by a score of, say, 10 points versus if a prospect is company size of 1 employee, we may want to score that a 2 or a 0. So we want to take all the characteristics of our ICP and make sure that we put weighted score next to those so that we can make sure that anytime we capture a lead or anytime there's a lead in our database, we know to effectively rank them and know who we're really going after within our ABM campaigns. Like you can see on the right side. So I have an example of characteristics of an ICP fit score and how those factors can weigh into your overall of how you weigh them out. So everything from size, geolocation, technographics, and then how they weigh out based on that, and then their disposition of how they best fit into our company and who we're trying to target. And this should be a collaborative exercise. This isn't something that marketing should do in a silo. So this isn't something where the marketing director should say, wow, I think that, construction companies of 50 employees or fintech companies of 50 to 500 employees that integrate with Salesforce are the right fit for us. And that's who we're going to weigh. And they're going to be 10 points for Salesforce integration, 10 points for geographic location, 10 points for number of employees. And that's what we're going to go with. This needs to be a collaborative exercise between sales, marketing, and potentially data operations and product, so that what are actually the things that salespeople, what can they confirm that when they see a lead come across, they know right away that this is a perfect fit. Because obviously they're talking to prospects on a daily basis, and they know on the dot, okay, this person's a great fit, because when they ask those key prospecting questions about, what are you looking to do how big's your company, how many employees you have, those qualifying questions, they know off the bat what is a good fit and what's not. But it's also not only just working with them and working collaboratively on these ranking systems, on these criteria, but it's also looking at your historical data. So you don't just want to take the last couple of months of closed won opportunities to try to build out these criteria, but you want to go further back 6, 12 months of operational closed won data to see what are the characteristics and trends of those opportunities and how they fit into your ICP fit score. So match up what you've drafted and see, does the historical tell us that, opportunities that, of this that fit these criteria, do they match up with what we've just drafted? Do they fit into these industry groups? Or what would they be scored next to our new fit score criteria? Would they be, an 80-point account? Would they be a 90-point account? So make sure what you're drafting fits with the accounts that you have closed within the last 6 to 12 months. And then you can refine it from there. So like I said, it should be a collaborative exercise. It shouldn't be necessarily a quick exercise, but it should be something you do in depth and make sure that it fits with both what sales and marketing are doing together, because ABM is a joint exercise. So once we have our ICP framework in place, we want to go ahead and start establishing our buyer personas. And now some people may say, what's the difference between ICP and a buyer persona? An ICP looks at your customers from the organizational level. And these are descriptions of types of companies that we want to try to sell and target. So that's a high level overview of the organizations we want to market and sell to. Whereas the buyer persona is defining the different buying patterns of companies within our target ICPs. So segments, roles, and personalities. And now this is why it's so important that we have our ICPs defined and agreed upon before we do this, because if we don't have our ICPs in place, we'll end up just focusing too much effort on too many different parts of the market. Because if you have a giant TAM, like we talked about before, and you don't have a defined ICP, you're going to be wasting a lot of time, a lot of money on too many different areas and spreading your team way too thin, which is why we talked about that first slide so much. And with that in place, we can really tailor our efforts on creating marketing campaigns and messaging that resonates with their needs that fit that ICP. So now our buyer's persona will give a name to demographic details, interests, and behavioral traits. We'll want to understand our buyer personas, their goals, pain points, and buying patterns. So that's really digging deep into these organizations and knowing who do we want to sell to in them. Who are they? What is their title? What do they care about? What challenges do they face? And so it's really, is it the VP of sales? Is it the marketing director? Is it the director of operations? Is it the head of SDRs? So for sales intel, we have basically 5 different personas that we really like to target based on their role within the company, from sales, marketing, and operations. And we have them defined out similar to this in a similar profile manner, but that allows us to know the messaging and content that we provide to them and allows us to segment out our marketing campaigns effectively. And the way, how do we get this data? How do we come up with this data? The one way is that we interview our internal team. So we interview our VP of sales and say, hey, Brad, what are the challenges and pain points that you face in your day-to-day life? What are those pain points? What are the goals and metrics that you're measured on? And what are your motivations to do a great job and what you try to strive for on a quarter-to-quarter basis? And then when you're looking at a new tool, Brad, as a VP of sales, what are those purchasing considerations? So one way to define and build out these profiles is look at your internal team, because they often go through the same things that the people you're prospecting to are. The other way is to survey and interview your existing closed-won opportunities that you've already closed in the past. So go to your existing clients and interview them. Get their insight. Go to the ones that are super happy with your service and say, hey, we're looking to really personalize our touch and personalize our messaging, and we want to get some insight from you as a successful customer of ours. And take them through some of these questions so you can really define what do successful customers look like and really refine your buyer personas based on successful customers of your service. So that's really important that we refine these buyer personas within our ICP and build out profiles just like this, because if you build out a profile just like this and have assets available similar to this, It allows sales to reference it quickly. It allows marketing to reference it quickly. It allows your team that does messaging, your creative team, to look at this and make sure content and copy are similar to these pain points. So it's important that you create assets that are similar to this as well. So we'll move on to our second part, which is now that we've done our ICP, now that we've defined our buyer personas and what those should look like, we want to start developing an effective buyer journey framework and our content map. So let's look at how we start doing that. Each of our buyer personas should have a well-defined buyer journey framework with stages attached to it. So, before we get into that, the framework should work is that once we have our ICP, defined out, and once that's been identified, we want to make sure that our framework fits for each of our personas and ICP segments, so that we can have a deeper understanding of what drives that particular persona to make a purchasing decision. What this framework represents is the decision-making process that a prospect will go through when evaluating and buying a solution. So it's really a key point to consider is that the buyer journey framework is a written form of the point of view of each persona and not from the point of view of the company. So we want to create this journey, not in the point of view ourselves, but the point of view of the actual prospect or the persona. And while the sales and marketing funnel is where the sales cycle of the company believes a prospect's in, they are not the same thing. So the buyer journey is not the same thing as the sales and marketing funnel. So this isn't stage 1, stage 2, stage 3 of pre-purchasing, in pipeline, stuff like that. They are two separate things, and that's why the POVs are different of where the prospect is in terms of evaluation, researching, stuff like that. It's important that we look at them as two separate things. So how will this framework be used is that once the buyer journey framework has been developed, it will really help us in providing the core messaging topics for each of our personas and ICP segments. And these can be applied across all communication channels and across all our go-to-market teams. And that's the important part, is that it aligns all of sales and marketing together on how we message to these prospects based on the stage they are with us. And that's the uniformity is the critical part there, because you've probably been in companies in that certain prospects are getting one type of message that's maybe focused on product, and it seems like it's more down funnel and it's an ebook or request a demo, whereas then another side of the company is sending them an email that's talking about download this ebook, and it's very top of the funnel. It's just very conflicting messages. So that's what this whole buyer journey framework is about, is making sure that they are getting the same type of message, same type of content based on where they are, and it's all uniform across the entire team. And this may include, like I said, outreach emails, calls, social media sequences, initiated by a BDR. It may be content driven by the ads, and then demand gen campaigns as well as outreach email sequences, and even customer success messages when a contract renews are on the horizon. So no matter what stage they're in, all these channels will be aligned together with the same message, whether it's a BDR, an outreach sequence, a sales loft sequence, or whether they're a stage post-purchase. Those messages from the customer success team and the automated marketing messages will be aligned with the message that they're sending to that customer at that time. That's the important thing. We don't want to send prospects conflicting messages, because that just delays their progression to the next stage. And so just to reiterate this, applying the framework is foundational to establishing, proper uniform messaging across all your channels. So right person, right message at right time is what we're trying to do in establishing a buyer journey to our prospects. So once we developed a buyer journey, and that buyer journey is different. So depending on company to company, and that buyer journey may be the ones that Forrester uses, where you have stage 1 through 6. That may be one that you develop your own, where you're talking about, pre-purchase, evaluation, research, pre-purchase, opportunity, and then post-purchase. So that buyer journey stage is really defined by your company and how you want to develop it internally for your prospect journey. You may have 3 stages to 6 stages, but it's really up to working with your marketing team and your sales team to find what those prospect stages are internally. And like I said, there's great frameworks from Forrester, Cirrus Decisions on what you can use from them in terms of example frameworks and how you can implement that internally. But it's important that you customize it to your own teams. Then we want to look at, once we have that framework in place, we want to audit and map our content to that buyer journey. So it's important that we make sure that, like I said, not only the messaging aligns to each of those stages, but that the content that we're feeding to the prospects on each of those stages matches up to them. Because it also helps us to identify what existing content do we have. I can't tell you how many times I've worked in a company and a salesperson would come up to me and say, do we have an ebook that talks about ABM or talks about how to use intent data to drive sales, or do we have a case study on that? I'll say, yeah, it's right in this sheet, or it's right on the website. It's right in the resources section. Like things I thought were so obvious, but the sales team had no clue were available to them. And it's because it's so hard sometimes to find these pieces of resources, these pieces of data or resources that they're not organized, they're not organized in a way, but it's also sometimes we're pumping out so many pieces of content that they get lost in the shuffle and they're not organized in a cohesive manner. So this is a great exercise because it allows you to take stock of all the assets you have, whether they be blogs, webinars, ebooks, white papers, all these different things. And you get stock of everything you have all together, how old they are, how out of date they may be. But then you can then start aligning those directly to what personas do they speak to? They speak to the marketing persona, the sales persona, the operations persona, whatever personas you've identified. And then what stages do they speak to in that buyer journey? So do they speak to the early buying stages, the really top of the funnel stages? Do they speak to the evaluation stages? Do they speak to the pre-purchase, in purchase stages, or is it post-purchase stages? So you can really start to not only see what stages they fit into, but also what personas they speak to. And then it allows you also to see, where do we have holes? I can tell you from example, when we were doing our own evaluation of content, we found a particular persona we were really underwriting content for. So we quickly realized that for a particular persona we had, particularly in operations, we said, wow, we haven't been writing the same amount of content for data operations as we have been for sales and marketing. So that allowed us to reprioritize our content team to start saying, guys, we need to reinforce this persona and the quality of content we write for them so that we can start catching up and making sure that we can fill the content gaps here. So that's another benefit of the content audit and mapping exercise, because you can see, do you have the content to support each of those stages and the personas that you want to market to? And then this content that you're mapping out is meant to help reinforce those value statements and make sure that they align to each of those particular stages in the buyer journey. So it's really about making sure the content is reinforcing the value statement of your solution and what you're trying to message to them in each of those stages. And if that content does it, then you need to rank it appropriately, because if it's just a blog post or it's a webinar that really isn't quality, then we need to rank that appropriately as well, and make sure that it doesn't get put into our messaging and sent to those prospects, because it may be super old and super out of date that is not relevant anymore to those prospects. So that's another piece of that audit, is to make sure we rank those pieces appropriately by the impact that they'll have in that stage. And then once we have all that together, like I said, we start filling in the gaps and we start baking that into our campaigns and then we'll talk about at the end of how we intertwine that with our data. So this is an example of how one of those audit and mapping processes can look like. So you can create a simple table just like this, where you have your content titles, your content types, your topics that they relate to, your personas then. So you'll see I have on here sales, marketing, SDR team lead, RevOps. Then you have your ICP fits. company size, vertical. You could have different other layers, technographic layers. And then we have our buyer journey stages. So you see here, I have my stage 1 and 2, the loosening of the status quo. And so for this instance, I'm using a Forrester model framework for our buyer journey stages for this example. You could be, but this is all personalized to what buyer journey stages that you've set up for your company. So, but here I have stages 1 and 2. I have, 5 and 6 for justifying the decision. So based on each of those pieces of content, I'm able to check the box of what they check off for. So if they're sales leaders, if they're in this stage, and then that allows me to quickly filter to see, okay, what pieces of content do I have for each of these different personas and these different stages that I can then use for campaigns? And by filtering each of these columns out, I can quickly find where I have my holes in my messaging. So I really love this table setup because you can quickly identify your deficiencies. You can quickly identify your strengths of your content, and then really reprioritize your content team to know where they need to focus their time on. Like I said, we figured out where we had some holes in our revenue ops leader persona. So we need to start creating more content around that. And we were quickly able to start filling that gap relatively quickly across our buyer journey stages. So if you like this template, I definitely recommend replicating it into some capacity. You can, there's a lot more columns to this that you can build out to make it a lot more detailed. And like I said, this is just a small snapshot of it. But if you like you see here, definitely take it and make it your own. But I've loved what we've done here. And it's really, really effective in mapping out your content and making sure it fits each of those buyer journey stages. And then we have part 3, which is our final part here. We're going to be talking about the tactics for leveraging your data to maximize your audience reach. So this is one of my favorite parts because, we really get to talk about how, really we've done all the hard work, right? We've looked at our ICP criteria. We looked at our buyer personas. Those are a lot of work, a lot of research, a lot of refinement, weighted scoring, making sure sales and marketing are on the same page, a lot of back and forth on those things. Then we go through and build out our buyer journey stages and what those look like, how we define those, what are the value statements of those. Then we have to dig into content and make sure all our content is aligned and where the holes are and how those align with each of those stages. But now we get to look at the kind of the fun part, which is, okay, do we have the data and the prospects to match up to each of those stages and where they are in each of those stages? So the first thing I like to do when we look at this is, before we start developing our target account list, is we need to do an audit of our own database. And so what this will mean is it allows to know what are the number of prospects we can currently target today? Because as you may or may not know, databases have taken a beating over the past couple of years, due to the Great Recession, mostly due to the Great Recession. A lot of people have been moving jobs, and the decay of databases has year over year turned over 30%. So the data we had in our databases has become outdated pretty quickly in terms of titles, organizations from those contacts. And so we've had to constantly refresh those databases, or if we haven't, then those contact details have gone cold and we're getting a lot more bounced emails than ever before. So first is to see how many valid data prospects do we have in our database that we can actually target based on our renewed ICP. So filtering that ICP, creating a list, putting our target criteria, and then see how many prospects in our database match up to that ICP and where they score out to. So if you have HubSpot, you can create a simple criteria report to see how many of prospects fit into those scoring buckets and to see where they match out. We can do that. The next thing is we want to map those prospects into the stages with us. So we can see, we want to map out where they fit into those stages, where they are in the buyer journey with us. Most of them, for the most part, if they're cold, less engaged leads, are going to be early buyer stages. So they're going to be, if they're not in opportunity stages currently with us, they're going to be probably more top of the funnel in those stage 1 or 2 early evaluation period with us, which is fine, because our goal is to move them down funnel or down the buyer journey into more evaluation and vendor selection, which is great. But we want to know where our prospects in our database are. And then also we want to identify during this database audit, what data are we missing to accurately score and assign contact accounts to our target campaigns. What you'll find in your database audit is that you may have a lot of incomplete records. And just like I mentioned before, you may have a lot of incomplete records based on out-of-date emails, out-of-date phone numbers, out-of-date company information. So we want to know of how many records you have in your database, how many of those can't you score properly based on your new ICP criteria? Because that gives us an opportunity to know, okay, if we have 50,000 records that are unscorable or have invalid email addresses or we're getting bounced emails from, that lets us know, okay, these are 50,000 records that are bad today. But if we had a enrichment platform or data platform that could allow us to update these emails, then they become valid again. So we just want to identify what are the bad emails or incomplete prospect records that we just need to enrich so they become valid again, and so we can rescore them. So we've done our audit. We've gone through the steps of our audit to score our current prospects and see how big is our target database today based on our ICP. Try to map our prospects as best as possible based on those qualified prospects. And then we've identified which of our prospects are currently invalid based on missing or incomplete data to know what's our opportunity to potentially increase our database if we were to enrich that data. The next part would be, okay, how can we further expand our database to hit our max serviceable attainable market or increase our TAM ratio to expand our reach into our audience based on our ICP? How can we expand our ICP reach? So the best way to do that is to utilize a B2B data platform and to add that to your tech stack, because it will allow you to do a couple of things. The first thing is you can utilize an enrichment type feature to clean up and enhance your CRM and your marketing database. This is one of the things I've learned since I've worked in the B2B data space, and this isn't just for sales intel, this is just in general, is that the ability to enrich your database for your client records, just because, like I said, over 30% of data records are basically becoming incomplete year after year just because of the movement of people now. The ability for these companies to basically update your profile records basically within minutes or hours, if you have a lot of records, just breathes new life into your database, because you don't have to trash those records anymore. Your team doesn't have to spend hours to look them up on LinkedIn and reconfirm each of those records, but it allows you now to take those records through an automatic sync with one of these B2B data providers, sync that data automatically. They do the audit for you. They verify that data for you, and then just feed it back into your HubSpot or Salesforce system. It allows your team then to rescore those records and place them into the correct targeting bucket for your ICP. So you'll know overnight if those 25,000 records that were previously incomplete and uncontactable, where they fit into your ICP scoring buckets, and if they can then be added to your targeting campaigns, which is huge. If you can re-add 25,000 contact records to your database without any work, that's a win for me. And that's huge, especially if you're running targeted ABM campaigns or wider reaching digital campaigns. The other thing is it can allow you to reveal key firmographic and technographic data. So if you've really started to extend your ICP criteria, so if you're one of those companies that didn't have an ICP criteria, or it was very kind of simple where you're just basing it off of employee size and industry, well, having a B2B data provider can fill in the gaps of your contact records so that you can actually find more prospects based on that criteria. So now you can find those integration points. So you could find prospects that are integrated with the softwares that you now added to your ICP criteria. So who are the contacts in those industries that you care about that integrate with Salesforce, or some industry specific software that you care about, or integrate with the dialer that you care about. So that's what these B2B platforms give you, is they give you the insight that you can't get on your own, that can allow you to add those target prospects that immediately will fit into your ICP criteria and expand your targeting database, which is important because you can basically fill in all your ICP criteria click search, and you'll be able to pull up those records that you can then add into your database and expand your reach automatically, which is great. And then you can then start removing the contacts from your database that no longer meet your criteria, right? So you can take all those low scoring contacts that are above a threshold that you deem untargetable. So maybe it's 40 or below or 20 or below. You can take all those unverified, not high scoring contacts and junk them, so that you're opening up space on your database, because if you're a HubSpot user, you know that space is very expensive. And then two, you can then import new contacts that do fit your scoring model, that are going to be high scoring, that you can then use for digital targeting, which is important. The third thing is these providers, and I know Sales Intel does it. I don't know if other providers do it necessarily, but if you work in a very small industry, and I know some of the clients we work with, they work in such small industries that even people like ZoomInfo can't find contacts for them. So what they do, and if you work in a small industry, you're able to do our request data research. So basically, you can come to us, submit a data request, and basically our team of 900 researchers will actually create target account lists for you based on the criteria you set up. So if you're like, I need 500 contacts that are in the welding software, the welding industry that are in Indiana and are sales directors, something so small like that, you can submit that request to our team, and they will work on that request specifically for you and come back with data for you, whatever they can find. So that is the cool thing, is that if you are pretty niche and you have a very strict ICP criteria, because you have high value accounts and high value contacts, and you want to build a super specific ABM campaign, you can submit a request over, and they'll get on it for you. And then you can just add those people to a campaign that you're setting up and import it into your database. And so that's what a B2B data provider can give you that you couldn't do necessarily on your own without hiring external staff to do that, or having a BDR that you're paying just to do that and look up data. So that's what I love, is that you can get really specific in what they can add to your database by doing a data request. And then also the other things is, a lot of these platforms now give you the ability to extract website visitor data, so that you can identify who's coming to your website, which companies are visiting your website on a daily basis. And then you can go ahead and turn those companies into new contacts within seconds. So basically, you can say, you identify, I have 15, 20, 30 different companies visiting my website on a daily basis, extract that data and automatically tie contacts that fit my ICP, and extract those contacts that fit my ICP into a list, and turn that into a retargeting campaign automatically, and start targeting them right away in the same day. And that's a cool thing that you may not be able to have the technology to do today, but with a B2B data provider, you can automatically start doing that. So that's another feather where you can add contacts on a daily basis based on the companies that are visiting and searching your website every single day. And then the last thing is intent data. This is what I think is one of the biggest things that you're not necessarily putting into your ICP criteria, but is so important for really targeting and really honing in your ABM campaigns, is layering in those active buyers that are searching for topics related to what you do within your industry. So basically, we can say, if we want to fill in what our criteria looks like into B2B platform search, industry, technographics, revenue, all that good stuff. But then we want to say, we want to only search for contacts and companies that are looking at these intent topics, that, if they're looking for, let's say if they're, data platforms or HR platforms, or they're searching particular topics on ABM. Let's say they're looking for ABM platforms, and that's what you sell. So we could layer in those intent topics, so that we're adding an extra layer of buyer intent, so that we are only getting the most interested contacts in our database. And that could be a separate campaign you even run too. But that's another scoring criteria you could potentially add to your ICP framework that you wouldn't be able to have without a buyer B2B data platform. So I love adding intent data, because that adds another priority item or priority scoring item that you can add to your overall framework. And then once you have all this stuff, you can start generating, like I said, target account lists, export them directly into your personalized content campaigns based on buyer stages, and you're off to the races. I mean, these target account lists that you create are literally exportable into HubSpot, Outreach, SalesLoft, and you can then feed them into those different outreach sequences, feed them directly to your sales team for call list campaigns, put them into your LinkedIn marketing solution so you can do digital targeting, Google Ads, you can do those match audiences so that you can do retargeting on there. But you make sure that all those audiences, those target account lists that you're generating, they all fit your frameworks, and they're only the audiences that you want to target. And then each of those outreach sequences that you've created, they're all based on your stages and based with the content that you've outlined. So they're all personalized based on everything we've talked about before. And that's the best part. You're pulling data based on the ICP and then fitting them into the right sequences that you want them to go into. So it all kind of fits cohesively together, which I love. And then this kind of sums it up. You know, this is how we build out the structure for success. Refine ICP in our buyer personas. Who do we sell to successfully, and what departments do we want to sell to within those? Gather our content, list out all of our assets, align each of them to a persona, identify what stage of the buyer's journey they are fit, and then identify the gaps in our content. And then finally, generate our target account list and launch our campaign. So utilize those frameworks to build out prospect lists, leverage the data providers to expand our coverage and hyper-targeted accounts, and then generate personalized flows with that new data and content. Those are the 3 stages. That's how you can be successful with whether it's ABM or general hyper-target, personalized targeting and messaging in general. So like I said, whether you're in ABM or just starting up ABM, you can be successful with this. Or if you're doing wider messaging and trying to get more personalized with your messaging and targeting, this can also be a framework for that as well. So I know we're up on time here. I really want to thank you all. This was a lot of content that had to be kind of chewed down into a 45-minute time frame here. But I really want to thank you all for your time and taking time out of your busy schedule to be on this presentation. I know I kind of had to breeze through a lot of it. So if you have any questions, please let me know. And if you ever want to learn more about enrichment or any of the things we talked about at the end, how you can really define your target account list down, please reach out to Sales Intel or any of the great providers that you're hearing about today, because they all can help you in many different ways. And definitely check out the Sales Intel sponsor booth during the ABM-A-THON. We would love to hear from you and help you out any way we can. But it's really been a pleasure speaking with you all today. Yes, thank you all for the comments. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. It's been a pleasure. Have a great one, everybody. Take care.